Maybe the terms of the MOU will change given all the criticism from inside the administration, from Republicans on Capitol Hill, not from us, but from Republicans. Maybe that will change the posture here of President Trump and the administration. But what's in there right now, and is supposed to be signed in a couple of days in Switzerland, is disastrous, frankly. You could add to the list, too, Joe, the front page of the Journal this morning, that Iran, following this deal, would be able to start selling oil again. So you have the slush fund, you have the unfrozen assets, you have the lifting of sanctions, and the ability to sell oil again. President Trump said just yesterday that the new regime in Tehran has been, quote, nice to deal with, that it is, quote, not radicalized, and that they are, quote, very rational people. That's the President of the United States talking about the regime in Tehran that has called for the death of the United States for 47 years. And, Joe, you made the point that Iran feels like it took its best punch. It also made a bet that all the bluster from President Trump was just that, bluster, when he said a civilization is going to die tonight. If they don't come to the table and get rid of the nuclear program, we're going to hit them harder than they'll ever be hit. And it never happened. And that was a bet that this regime made, that Donald Trump was all talk. And to this point, it appears that he has been, and that none of those objectives laid out on February 28th has been achieved yet. We'll see if further negotiations go deeper into the nuclear program. But from what we're seeing this morning, nothing is there for the U.S.
Well, you know, I've said on the show before, I had a meeting at the beginning of this war in Washington with leaders, not only thought leaders and journalists, but also leaders from other countries, people, members of government of other countries and from the region, who kept saying, America must finish the job it started. We didn't want them to get into this war, but America must finish the job it started. And I kept hearing this, and I said, that's not going to happen. And they became quite indignant, and they said, it has to happen. There's no other choice. They said, you're dealing with Donald Trump. At some point, this is going to become too uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And he's just going to pull the ripcord and get out of there when it becomes too uncomfortable politically. Some became quite indignant and said, that's not a possibility. I said, well, you've got to know who you're dealing with now, and that is very much a possibility. As far as the nuclear program goes, Donald Trump kept saying Iran can't have a nuclear weapon. And 7 presidents before him have agreed with him. And, you know, he has said, I'm the only one that's going to take care of that. Now he's become extraordinarily disinterested even in that topic. You talked about him saying nuclear material, nuclear dust. That's not even important anyway. I quoted Senator John Kennedy from Louisiana yesterday, who, when asked, will Iran stick to the terms of a nuclear deal, he said, well, if you believe they will, then you were obviously homeschooled by, what did he say, a day drinker. He says that's a Louisiana term. You are homeschooled by a day drinker. It will never happen. But that's where we are. And, Willie, you showed, again, this is not left-wingers like at The Nation or at MS Now or at the New York Times editorial page. This is coming from Republicans and from Murdoch's own newspapers. Show, as you did before, I think you're reaching for it right now. Talk about what that means. They obviously have gotten, and some editorial writers inside there who are Donald Trump's biggest supporters, going after him hard now.
Yeah, this is the front page of the New York Post, which has bent over backwards, even on the war in Iran, to support Donald Trump, effectively calling this a love bomb, that we bombed Iran at the beginning of the campaign, and now we're ending this war with a love bomb, meaning it's showering, to put it in New York Post terms, showering the mullahs with cash and taking away the sanctions, calling the president out for saying the Islamic regime is not radical. All on the front page of the New York Post. I showed you the Wall Street Journal that's openly critical. You have people on Fox News, panelists calling the president of the United States Neville Trump. That's on Fox News, comparing him to Neville Chamberlain. Not going over well, and we're hearing that now publicly, but certainly privately from a lot of Republicans on Capitol Hill as well, saying we cannot agree to this deal. And some senators saying you got to put this in front of us for a vote if you actually want to get this. Let's bring in Chief White House Correspondent for the New York Times, Peter Baker, and staff writer at The Atlantic, Frank Foer. Good morning to you both. Peter, I'll start with you. Can you shed any more light about this memorandum of understanding? It is just that. For now, it's an agreement to talk further down the road. But some of the terms that Bloomberg, the New York Post, and others are reporting would be unacceptable to most Republicans on Capitol Hill and, frankly, probably to most Americans.
Yeah, this is what unconditional surrender looks like under the Trump administration. Remember, of course, he said he wasn't going to end the war unless he got unconditional surrender. Well, the question is who, I guess, did the surrendering. That's what you're going to hear from Republicans who think this deal looks a lot like the Obama deal or worse in some ways. Remember, the criticisms of the Obama deal were that it gave Iran access to money again and allowed them to have some of its own sanctioned funds in exchange for a promise not to, pursue nuclear weapons and not to do a certain amount of enrichment for a certain number of years. And it did not make any promises on reining in their terrorist proxies. It did not make any promises on ballistic missiles. Well, this deal doesn't have anything to do with ballistic missiles or reining in proxies either. And they're getting money in exchange for a commitment potentially down the road, if it's actually worked out in details, to restrain their nuclear program. It seems an awful lot like the same concept that Donald Trump ripped up when he came into office. And even when Obama made his deal in 2015, you didn't hear him praise the Iranian leadership as being not radical and being reasonable people to deal with.
Rational.
So I think you're going to hear a lot of people, at least if they're consistent with their past views on the Hill, asking a lot of tough questions.
Yeah, and President Trump's going to face those questions, and he is going to try to bluster and spin past them. But as I wrote in The Atlantic this morning, President Trump lost this war. The United States leaves it weaker economically, strategically, militarily, and for President Trump, perhaps foreshadowing, his eventual lame duck status, where we are seeing leaders of the world begin to defy him. Europe doing so on Ukraine, Xi Jinping in China refusing to give him a trade deal, and now it appears Iran gets the best of him in this agreement. This is a war in which Trump achieved none of his goals. He's now walked away from most of them. Iran still has the ability to support terror groups with this windfall, perhaps, that they will soon get, $300 billion. They have far more control over the Strait of Hormuz than they ever had before. And then said in 60 days, they have suggested they will put together some sort of toll or fees mechanism there. Trump even walking away from trying to get the uranium that's in Iran, saying yesterday, well, what's the point? It's no big deal of it anyway. And Frank Ford, the other thing that's happened here that would be considered a win for Iran is that suddenly it appears Israel may be checked in its ability to strike in the region. Trump has told Prime Minister Netanyahu several times in recent days, don't do this, don't go to Beirut, don't hit them. When Netanyahu has authorized some attacks anyway, Trump has been sharply critical, calling him a difficult person and worse in some interviews. And this whole agreement could be endangered if Israel continues to lash out Lebanon, including reports of attacks this morning.
Right. I mean, Donald Trump was just a month ago touting himself as the most popular politician in Israel, saying he could be president of Israel. But now that story has completely flipped because Israelis are very frustrated that Iran seems to have this veto power over Israel's ability to operate in Lebanon, that the north of Israel has continued to be attacked, and they're not able to respond by striking Hezbollah leadership in Beirut. And so this is just one among the many ways in which Iran has proven what you just described, the point that Donald Trump is a lame duck president. They patiently waited him out here. They were able to maintain, to achieve some of their most important goals here, which is that they wanted to restore their deterrence, which I think they effectively did by showing that they could take our best punch. They wanted to be able to maintain their most important military proxy, which is Hezbollah, which they've effectively been able to do. And when it comes to these negotiations that are about to happen, what leverage does the United States have? The details matter in these types of agreements. Whatever negotiation happens over nuclear materials, the details matter. And we don't have leverage in these negotiations. The blockade is gone. The promises that are made in this understanding suggest our ability to fold. They've waited us out.
Fold? I mean, this is running away tail between legs. I mean, the entire basis of this war, when President Trump was asked to give one after he attacked Iran was that Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. Marco Rubio parroted that. Everybody said Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. I mean, if Bloomberg's reporting on this MOU bears out and it doesn't change in any way, this is more than folding. And meanwhile, look at what President Trump is doing right now. He's lashing out at former President Obama. It just happened moments ago when he was asked about the Iran memorandum.
Nobody could have made this deal. I mean, the JCPOA done by Obama, he handed him $1.7 billion in cash, gave him hundreds of millions of dollars, gave him billions and billions of dollars, but he gave him $1.7 billion in cash, green cash from banks, into a Boeing 757 and flew it into Iran. And they stood at the plane. I have pictures of it, like, oh my God, look at this money he's giving us. He tried to bribe his way out. I didn't do that. Nobody mentions that. $1.7 billion and hundreds of millions of dollars. They tried to bribe their way out of it. And you know what the Iranians did? They laughed at Obama and they said he's a stupid son of a bitch.
Yeah, no, they actually didn't. You know, the thing is, a couple of things. The president said there that nobody could have made this deal. Let me just change one word in there. Nobody would have made this deal. No Republican politician in the United States Senate would have made this deal. None of Donald Trump's allies at the Wall Street Journal or the New York Post would have made this deal.